I went somewhere recently that I haven't really been able to stop thinking about. It's called the Jeon Tae-il Memorial Hall. And before I tell you what it's like inside, you need a bit of context. Jeon Tae-il was a 22-year-old garment worker in Seoul in the late 1960s, working in these small, overcrowded factories. And then in 1970, he did something that's now one of the most defining moments in South Korea's labor rights history. He set himself on fire in protest, calling for workers to be treated like human beings and for the labor laws to actually be enforced. So when you walk into the Jeon Tae-il Memorial Hall, that's the context you're carrying with you. He was a young garment worker in Seoul during a time when the country was industrializing really fast. Factories were everywhere. Production was everything, and workers, especially young workers, were often invisible. The pace of growth didn't leave a lot of room for humane conditions. Long hours, unsafe environments, wages that didn't reflect the effort being put in. And what's striking is that how young he was while noticing all of this. There's something almost disarming about seeing his age in the context of everything he was doing. Because you expect someone leading a movement, someone questioning systems, to be older, more established, more distant from the vulnerability of youth. But he wasn't. He was right in it. He read labor laws. That's one of the details that really stuck with me. He didn't just feel like things were wrong. He went out of his way to understand what was supposed to be right. And then he realized that even the protections that existed on paper weren't being followed. The gap between what should be and what is such a simple concept, but when you see it through his perspective, it becomes very personal. There's this persistence in the way he approached things. He tried to raise awareness, he talked to others, he pushed in ways that didn't immediately create change. And I think the memorial does a really good job of not rushing past that part. Because it would be easy to focus only on the moment everyone remembers, the moment that defined his legacy, but instead you're allowed to sit in the build-up. You see the frustration, the hope, the effort that didn't always get the response it deserved. At one point you come across representations of sewing workshops, the spaces where workers spent most of their time, and it's not exaggerated, it's not dramatized in a way that feels performative, it's almost understated, which somehow makes it feel more impactful. You start to imagine the repetition of the work, the hours blending into each other, the physical strain that becomes normal because there's no alternative. And then you think about how many people were living that exact reality at the same time. It shifts your perspective a little bit because it's not just about one person anymore. It's about a whole environment that existed and how one person chose to confront it in a way that forced others to look. There's also personal items, letters, notes, things that carried his handwriting. And there's something about handwriting that makes everything feel closer. You can almost hear the tone behind it. The memorial doesn't overwhelm you with information, but it also doesn't simplify anything. It gives you the truth and the facts. There's admiration, obviously, but also this kind of heaviness and reflection. You start thinking about what it means to notice something is wrong, and then what it means to actually act on that. Because noticing is one thing, acting is another. And Jeon Tae-il didn't just notice. His final act is something that's deeply tied to labor rights history in South Korea. It's something that sparked conversations that couldn't be ignored anymore, and the memorial approaches it with a lot of care. It's not sensationalized, it's not presented in a way that feels like it's trying to shock you. Instead, it's contextualized. You understand why it happened, not in a way that justifies it, but in a way that makes you see the depth of his desperation and determination at the same time. And I think that balance is really important, because it allows you to walk away not just remembering what he did, but understanding what led him there. There's also this sense of continuation throughout the space, like his story didn't end with him, it moved outward. You start to see how his actions influenced labor movements, how awareness grew, how conversation shifted. It didn't feel like a closed chapter, it feels ongoing. And that's something I didn't expect to feel so strongly. There are areas that feel more open and others that feel more enclosed, almost guiding your emotional pacing without you realizing it. At times it feels reflective, at other times it feels settling. There were moments where I wasn't even looking at anything specific, just standing there letting everything settle a bit. And those moments felt just as important as reading or watching anything, Because the story isn't something you absorb intellectually, it's something you process emotionally in your own way. If you're someone who likes understanding the deeper layers of a place, this is a kind of space that gives you that opportunity. At the same time, it's accessible. You don't need to come in with extensive prior knowledge to understand what you're experiencing. Reading about Jeon Tae-il is one experience. Being in a space dedicated to his life is another. You notice details differently, and I think that's why places like this matter. They create a kind of connection that's harder to achieve through information alone. By the time I was leaving, I didn't feel like I had just learned something. It felt more like I had spent time with a story, in a way that made me think about how individual actions can ripple outward, how awareness can grow from a single voice, how change can often start in spaces that don't feel powerful at first. It also made me think about the importance of remembering, not just in a historical sense, but in a human sense, because stories like this can easily become simplified over time, reduced to a few key facts, a name, a date, an event. But the memorial resists that. It brings back the nuance, the humanity, the parts that make the story feel alive rather than distant. And I think that's what makes it worth visiting. Not just to understand what happened, but to feel connected to why it mattered. If you ever find yourself in Seoul and you're looking for something that's meaningful and reflective, this is one of those places.